A certain amount of cash on hand is always a good idea, but also short-term government debt instruments and hard goods, so real, tangible, physical things that will hold value in hard times, things that you would really want to have around if push comes to shove and you don't really have much money. What would you want to have that would be useful? Land, if you can afford it, land with productive capacity, the ability to produce and control some of your own energy supply, a certain amount of capacity to produce food. These are all things that you can do if you have resources up front. It's harder if you wait too long.
Yes.
But if you take action before things get difficult, then there's a great deal that people can actually do.
It's the exercise in sharing. That's the big part of it. And then people go, oh, well, that's effortless. I didn't need to be holding so much in. I can, and I'm getting more. I get more, and I live in a neighborhood which I feel safer and more secure in, because that's the attitude. And from there you can get innovative with all sorts of things in how you face the future.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in Vancouver, BC, with a couple of folks that are like a Paul and Paula Revere going around the world saying big things are happening and here's what you can do about it. I'm with Nicole Foss, who's the senior editor of The Automatic Earth, and Laurence Beaumont, who's from New Zealand, who's the founder of the Bank of Real Solutions. I am intrigued to hear about this. Thank you both for joining me. You're on a speaking tour all over the North American continent, and that's probably just the start. About what you're saying, Nicole, we're meeting limits of growth of all kinds here in this early part of this century, actually. The closest of which is about finance, the money system. So would you kind of give us a picture, because for people to know what's going to be happening, what they can do and what their communities can do, sort of what we want to look at. What's happening?
Well, essentially, we're reaching the end of a long period of expansion. And so we started to see the consequences of that in 2008, where we had wobbles. We didn't see much here in Canada. In Canada, there was about 6 months of uncertainty, and that's all there was. But in America, where the housing bubble really started to burst in earnest, it was a much more serious event. And of course, now in Europe, Europe is far ahead of where the United States even is, or was in 2008, moving into contraction. So at the end of a period of expansion, you move into economic contraction, and that's basically what's happening. So we've had this long period where we essentially expanded everything, economic activity, the money supply. We created an enormous pile of credit and debt. We've all heard of the debt crisis around the world. You can increase debt for a certain amount of time, but then you have to pay the piper. So you end up with the bursting of that credit bubble, and you have a period of economic depression that always follows a long period of bubble blowing. So we've had the bubble, now we're moving into economic depression. People really need to think in terms of how to insulate themselves from the effects of what's coming. So an awful lot of people are carrying a very large amount of debt, for instance, and they don't have any savings. They tend to use their credit card balance as their rainy day fund, and they tend to be rather disengaged from their neighbors and society, because we're all so busy. We're on these treadmills that keep going faster and faster. So our society has become rather atomized. So we're overstretched. That's really the picture of where we are now. We're very much overstretched, and we're going to find that there are consequences to being overstretched. So people have to start thinking before they're forced to change, they need to think in terms of holding less debt, building up savings, and building the connections with other people that will allow them to make an easier job of moving through harder times, because we are most certainly moving into considerably harder times economically. And that will be the first limit, not the only limit we reach over the next few years and few decades, but it will be the first one.
So you're talking about people, you have on your website a nice how do you build your lifeboat, sort of the individual lifeboat of first one, no debt, right, or get out of debt, or don't hold a mortgage. I mean, it was things like that.
Yes, if you can manage it, definitely, because there's no safe level of debt, unfortunately. in a period like this, asset prices fall precipitously, as we saw in the United States with the bursting of the housing bubble.
That's right.
And it's nowhere near finished. There's
Really?
oh, absolutely not. There's a small Fed-funded asset bubble pseudo-recovery going on in the American housing market at the moment. But there would be no mortgage activity if the whole thing wasn't on the taxpayers' shoulders. So essentially, we're going to see another fall. It's going to be at least as big a fall again. So house prices fall a very long way when you move into a contraction because people won't be able to get mortgages. And when your pool of buyers is the handful of people who can buy something in cash, and who choose to use very scarce cash, as cash will be at that point, at that particular time, that pool of buyers is very small. That means that there's no support, no price support at anything like current levels. And that means an awful lot of people will be underwater on their mortgages. Far more people than have been so far.
Wow. I mean, that's dire. So the best resilient preparedness that a family is trying not to be in debt, but you said cash is king in your notes.
Cash is king,
but
you can't,
don't put it in a bank.
Yes,
I mean,
don't trust the solvency of middlemen, because the banking system has been playing fast and loose with people's savings for quite some time. Basically, your savings are not regarded as your money by the banking system. They're regarded as a bank liability. In other words, a promise the bank has made to you to repay a certain amount of money. But one of the characteristics of an economic depression is the comprehensive breaking of promises. So your bank balance is just yet another promise that's been made, which may or may not be honored. So we have to be very careful with trusting the system to be able to deliver on its promises when it is every bit as overstretched as individuals are and companies, if not more so.
you've said it's like a Ponzi scheme.
Very much so.
Meaning there's
financial
promise on
system
a
is
promise on a
Ponzi
promise.
scheme. Absolutely it is.
And once we start eroding the trust that you're going to get paid back, I mean, will it just fall like a house of cards?
It's very likely to do that. And Europe is in the forefront. So all we really have to do is look at what's happening in Europe at the moment. Particularly in Greece and Spain, where they're absolutely in the thick of economic depression right now. They're already in a state of liquidity crunch where there's very little money around. There's very high unemployment. They're raising taxes. They're cutting services. They're imposing austerity measures right, left, and center. But even more than Greece and Spain, to look at what's happened in Cyprus this year, where the Cypriot banking system essentially failed. And instead of a taxpayer bailout, they bailed out the bank with the depositors' funds.
Ouch.
So they used the depositors' money, not all of it. The smaller accounts for the time being have been spared, although they did initially threaten to haircut those as well. So they destroyed the faith and deposit guarantees when they did that, even although they backed off. So the banking system collapsed, the banks closed, the ATMs were empty, store shelves were empty. It became a cash-only economy in about a week.
Wow, that's fast.
Absolutely.
And it could have, what you're saying is it's possible.
Yes, it's
Or
possible.
likely,
And in the case of
Here.
Cyprus, it wiped out their business model as an offshore financing center. It wiped out a whole raft of Cypriot businesses that had their money in the banking system. So they've taken a step 50 years back in the space of a very short period of time. This is what can happen. And the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand all either have or are developing legislation to facilitate bank bail-ins with depositors' money. So we can't trust that system to keep its promises.
So when you say don't trust the middlemen, don't trust the banks, where can one, if one has, where does one put their wealth?
Well, there are a number of
sort
ways.
Of safely, other than under the mattress.
Well, a certain
one.
amount of cash on hand is always a good idea. If nothing else, you're going to have to pay your taxes in the currency of the realm.
Right.
So you need to have something on hand to deal with that. But also short-term government debt instruments and hard goods. So real, tangible, physical things that will hold value in hard times. Things that you would really want to have around if push comes to shove and you don't really have much money. What would you want to have that would be useful? Bicycles, spare parts, water filter systems, land if you can afford it, land with productive capacity, the ability to produce and control some of your own energy supply, a certain amount of capacity to produce food. These are all things that you can do if you have resources up front. It's harder if you wait too long.
Yes.
But if you take action before things get difficult, then there's a great deal that people can actually do. And what I'm trying to do, what we've been trying to do at the Automatic Earth really since early 2008 when we started, we've been trying to encourage people to take action in advance so that when the larger scale systems are not functioning so well, there's something else that's there to take up the slack that we can then build up. There'll be an idea lying around, a workable idea, a workable framework that we can then scale up so that we can minimize the impact of a bust. We can't prevent a bust. That's inevitable at this point because we've had the boom. So the bust is coming, but we can certainly mitigate the impact of it. And an awful lot of it has to do with building connections in community. I think that's going to be critical.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I mean, as some of our viewers know, we live off grid, and so we have that local energy source and wood and so on. But I realize no one homestead can do it all. You can't. You need each other. We need each other. We need the other people, which partly lends us towards what you're thinking, Laurence, about what can communities do for more of that resilience, working together. Give us an idea here.
Well, first is the realization of how important we are to each other. It's my preferred option of survival. I think it was Heimberg who said that community is the core unit of survival. And it's also, I don't want to live in a bunker. I don't.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I'd get bored with my own company, and I want the things that others bring to my life, and not just the services, but the fun and the joy of it. So, as that's so important, how do we cooperate? How do we build a collaborative culture and build those important relationships now? And so I bring forward, through the Bank of Real Solutions and my work in general, lots of how-to success stories, how communities are doing that. And some of them may seem a little simple and folksy, but they're actually quite powerful and effective. And I also extrapolate that out into wider virtual communities and how much we can do to change the course of future history. I'm quite excited about that. I'm allow a little optimism out of the crises we face because they're the opportunity for change. People don't change when they're comfortable, and we're long overdue for some changes on the planet, and so there is a big opportunity, and I see the evidence to support that all up and down our tour of the Northwest here. Has been very exciting to see how much people are doing, and I have witnessed that a lot in New Zealand and all across the world.
Can you give us a couple examples, or at least one?
Yes, well, the key thing is to come together, and that is in like meaningful projects are very good. Simple things are environmental restoration projects in a community. If you start with your local stream or park, that's a place where you build connection with each other, doing something together, and it's also you're building it with nature. So it's a good connection, and it gives a long-term payback that you witness, you see it growing. But then you can move that forward into things like local currencies, which I can say a bit more about, and even things as simple as eating together in a street. One example in Fremantle, sustainability streets over there, which seem to be spreading beautifully around the world.
Sustainability streets.
Yeah, the idea of working on just a street level of things. But these people in Fremantle that Nicole knows,
Fremantle.
Western Australia.
Western Australia, sorry, on the map. They wanted to connect their neighbourhood, so they had announced film screenings in the street. Bring your couch out and your beanbag and your popcorn, and we're going to run a film in the street. So they just put up a big screen over a van, and people came and watched it. And after that, the street started to connect, and they moved sideways into all sorts of directions, like workshops for people in the street on sustainability, on energy, gardening. They put out a little library on the street for people to have books on these subjects, and they put out a bike shed for everybody. A
bike shed?
A bike shed
Really?
on the street that people could share.
Nice,
Now, that's an exciting development, is this rise of collaborative culture. Rachel Botsman did a book on it called What's Mine Is Yours, the rise of collaborative consumption, she called it, but I think the advanced term is culture.
Yeah.
And people are finding they don't need to have all these things themselves. So you don't need to have a tool shed with all your tools in. You can have a neighbourhood tool shed.
What people want is access. Is what one of our
Yes,
folks.
much
They
so.
want access at the time they need it, but we don't need to own it.
Don't need to own it, don't need to house it and have all that extra cost of housing. And maybe
And
for
repair
a car too.
Yes.
Do I
Yes.
need a car all year round, or do I just need it, say, 4 or 5 days a month? And these car cooperatives seem to be taking off. And it's a really exciting whole new culture that is unleashing on the world that I'm very optimistic about. And of course, at a local level, it can be felt really strongly. And I think every neighbourhood, every few blocks should have a collective outdoor eating place for people to
It's
eat.
fabulous.
Yeah.
And Laurence has been involved in setting up hubs, environmental community hubs, where people come together to engage in a whole variety of projects.
Now, is that a physical place, a hub,
A
or is
phys-
it
a phys-
a
A physical hub, yes, you can have virtual hubs that work
Sure.
very well for people, free cycling. And on Bainbridge Island, they've got a very good one for just a gifting economy hub where people things they don't need anymore, and you just go and pick them up and they share them around the community. It's beautiful. And they also had lovely little booths for books, library sharing.
That's spreading all over.
That's
we found that in
spreading
Seattle.
on-
We found
yeah,
this
yeah.
in Victoria. It's like that's such a lovely, good start, right? A little closed in, so it doesn't get wet. Books and people writing. Here's a book I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It's like
and it's the exercise in sharing. That's the big part of it. And then people go, oh, well, that's effortless. I didn't need to be holding so much in. I can, and I'm getting more. I get more, and I live in a neighbourhood which I feel safer and more secure in, because that's the attitude. And from there you can get innovative with all sorts of things in how you face the future. And like in Littleton in New Zealand, in the South Island, which is just near Christchurch, it was the epicentre of a devastating earthquake. Now, for our second largest city in New Zealand. And their time bank and their community projects and focus made Project Littleton and its time bank as the emergency response mechanism for that community. The official agencies came in afterwards and took their cues from the time bank, because it was so entrenched into the community.
So the time bank, people, tell us how that worked.
Well, a time bank is a currency. I'm a keen fan of currencies.
Local
currencies,
right?
but also all sorts of
Regional.
alternative currencies.
Okay.
I believe the future of money is multiple currencies.
Okay. Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, well, if you're into a
Yeah.
free market, it's a natural extension of a free market to have a free market of credit systems, that people can create whatever credit systems that other people want to freely use. No one should be controlling our liquidity.
That's right. One is too few.
Indeed, and too limiting and too restrictive.
Yeah.
And doesn't become 21st century humanity. It's very old technology, the monetary system we're using. So we now live in the age of multiple currencies, and we're giving birth to new ones every day. I mean, things like Bitcoin are just one example, but we have LET systems, which are very common.
Let's, yes.
Let's.
Local exchange trading systems.
systems, yeah, which of course was given birth to up here in Vancouver, wasn't it?
Right.
And there's hundreds of those around the world. We use one in Golden Bay. We have our own paper currency.
Okay.
We have our own.
Beautiful.
It is indeed a beautiful currency.
Yeah.
And
with hands holding.
with
I
the
like
ethic
that.
on those kind of ethics, or so it reflects the values we have in our community. And I see there's a one up here called Seed Stalk here. And which do you remember, Nicole? Which vicinity?
I don't remember where that came from.
It's quite
Another
a beautiful
beautiful.
currency too.
It's very important, because one of the main aspects of what's coming in financial terms is a liquidity crunch. So when you crash the money supply by crashing the supply of credit, given that credit's about 99% of the money supply, at that point we realize there's not actually very much cash. So if you don't do something else, then you're going to find there's almost no cash in circulation, and then it gets very difficult. You can't connect producers and consumers, or buyers and sellers. That's at the heart of an economic depression, where there's not enough money in circulation to support economic activity. But by using alternative currencies, we can provide our own liquidity and support economic activity in local areas. This is what they're doing in Greece right now, all over the place.
As a means of survival. And I do believe that in terms of preparedness, that currency is one of the most important survival tools as a currency, because goodwill will only go so far, and we're used to using money. The problem is there's no money around, and people suffer horribly because there's no cash around. There's a cash contraction. So the point is, we do have the liquidity, we do have the money, and in my own area of Golden Bay, New Zealand, where 10% of the people use our local currency system, if the mainstream system fell over tomorrow, we would all be trading immediately. We have the currency
That's
to
fabulous.
trade. Yeah,
That's
we
good.
have the currency to strengthen and uphold our business activity and also meet social need. So, because in harder times there's increased social need, and people go, oh, but we can't do anything because we don't have the money. Yes, we do have the money.
I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, I think what is so exciting to me about what you're saying is you put a lie to, oh, there isn't enough money. And so those communities, they're putting in alternative currencies in some form or other, are sort of putting a path breaking there for their other community. It will expand when the necessity arrives for it, really. But if they've already got it moving, I mean, that fills in the hole for me.
It absolutely does.
That's wonderful.
It's a monopoly over money supply that really confers an enormous amount of power. So one of the Rothschilds said quite a long time ago, give me control over a nation's money and I care not who makes its laws. It's that power over money that allows you to create artificial scarcity and control all sorts of things, people's access to food and shelter and all manner of other things.
Everything.
It allows the people with the control over the money supply to hold hostage people's ability to function so that they have to pay dues into the larger system all the time. But if you break that monopoly, then that doesn't have to be the case. So then we really see that a lot of that scarcity is artificial. Not that local currency is going to produce any more oil out of the ground than was otherwise going to come.
Right.
But
Sure.
it allows us to oil the wheels of interactions between us that really are a lot about how we function practically. So it can make an absolutely enormous difference to the way a period of crunch actually plays out.
This is beautiful. Thank you, Nicole.
It's-
Thank you, Laurence. And I realize this is just the tip. I mean, your talks, your DVDs that will be on the Automatic Earth. I mean, that's what will allow people to go further with this.
Yeah.
I am thrilled both to have people understand what's happening in this contraction, and that it's not the end of the world, or it's the end of that kind of world.
It's at
We
the
don't
end
need
of a
to be able
world
to-
we've got tired of and don't want
And we don't
anymore
need
anyway.
anymore.
Yeah.
It had been
Yeah.
taking us in pathological directions
Yes,
for a long
yes.
time. So cannibalizing our natural capital environmentally
Yes,
and,
yes,
and
yes.
creating enormous amounts of mess and difficulties and running up against resource limits of every kind in our frantic desire to consume as much as we can right now.
Insanely.
So
Insanely.
with these new monetary systems, you can bring different covenants to them to reflect the values you hold. And so just the same in an intentional community, you will have covenants on how the land is used and that type of thing. You can have covenants in your currency to what values that your money represents. And that can be very flexible. And you can build a currency just around a project in your community, if you like. That only works to get that project going. And there are so many different systems. Like Bitcoin has caught the imagination of people, and that's a great exercise in flexibility of thinking. And it's a very robust system that takes a little bit of study to work out how it works. But it is most promising. But it's only one. It's only one of new systems that are being developed every day in a very creative way. We have barter card in New Zealand, which is also in the United Kingdom and Australia. In New Zealand, with just 4 million people, we have 7,000 businesses belong to barter card, and they are architects, lawyers, accountants, people who own accommodation facilities, and they use swipe card and electronic banking. Our little folksy hand system in Golden Bay uses an electronic system. So and that's a 7,000 businesses, business
That's
to business
that's
trading.
substantial.
Yeah, and that's a non-dollar system. Everyone pays their taxes.
Yeah.
But of course, in a change towards more enlightened government, people would be allowed to pay their taxes in whatever currency it's produced in. And just before the last general election in New Zealand in 2011, I was a co-founder of a whole new political party called the New Economics Party. And that's what we proposed in amongst a whole kind of multiple currencies. And I mean, a local government can issue a currency, a regional currency backed by local government. That's very powerful. And there are precedents of that, such as in...
I'm going to stop you only because we're going to do, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, for both of you. That's exciting. I mean, it's exciting that what the narrows that we're going through is the potential for all that kind of creative opportunity.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you. Thank you. Carry on sending the message. You're
And
watching... I'm going to... What? Go ahead.
If we didn't have crises, we wouldn't change. So we're lucky because we're crises rich. So it's a great time in the human calendar.
Welcome to the crises. You already knew that was happening. And welcome to the creativity that brings. Yes? Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Laurence. There's more. You're watching Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and you should feel hopeful, huh? Join us next time.